Okay, so with the release of Spider-Man No Way Home, we have 11 Spider-Man and Venom films. So today I, the film watcher, shall be ranking all 11 of them from my least favorite to my favorite. Let's do this. In last place is The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Now, I think the stuff with Peter and Gwen is actually pretty compelling and interesting, and Garfield and Stone are still great in their respective roles. Gwen's death is an absolutely gut-wrenching scene that's done unbelievably well. Some of the action and visuals are pretty cool. The rest of the film, however, is pretty much crap. It's highly convoluted and overstuffed with bizarre plot lines that don't make any sense. For some reason, they continue making reference to Peter's parents, and I don't understand this franchise's overwhelming urge to do that. There's also way too many villains, and not one of them is good. Electro is completely absurd. For one, he starts out super awkward. You feel bad for him, but not in the way that you should. He's not sympathetic, he's just pathetic. And the way he gets his powers is really stupid. Instead of in the comics, when he gets struck by lightning while holding power cables, he falls into a tank of electric eels while holding power cables, and then they straighten his teeth. And then they try to musicalize his thoughts and incorporate it into the score, and I don't know what they were going for here, but it is downright comical and absurd. It doesn't make any sense. There's the Rhino, who is laughably stupid, and you also have Harry Osborn, played by Dane DeHaan, who I swear is just a knockoff Bully Maguire. I mean, look at the guy. He ends up turning into the Green Goblin, and while I get the criticisms of Willem Dafoe's costume, this is infinitely worse. It looks absolutely ridiculous, and the mannerisms of the Goblin are just so cringeworthy, specifically his laugh. It's absurd. They easily could have done this with Norman Osborn, and I feel it would have been better, especially since they got Chris Cooper to play him. That would have been awesome. There's also some weird villain teases, like Felicia Hardy and Alistair Smythe. They feel pretty out of place, considering we never got the third film in this franchise. But you want to know the biggest insult of all? This movie has Peter email and talk about J. Jonah Jameson and never once shows him. Are you kidding me? Peter's working for J. Jonah this entire time and he never even shows up? What is the matter with you people? Number 10, The Amazing Spider-Man. I did kind of like this movie. I don't think it's great by any means. In fact, it's barely even good. It starts out pretty lifeless and lacking in energy and specifically fun. I mean, say what you will about the Raimi trilogy, but all three of those films are fun. This movie, for some reason, puts a lot of focus on Peter's parents, specifically his father. Okay, the only reason that Peter Parker canonically has parents at all is because you have to have parents in order to exist. All we need to know about them is that they had Peter and now he's raised by his aunt and uncle. And this movie just doesn't do a good enough job of building a mystery around them to make you care. I also think it would have made more sense to have Peter be in college for a couple of reasons. For one, it's odd that he's like a junior or senior in high school and is able to get access to so much stuff at Oscorp, which you'd think would be pretty secure to especially a high schooler. And the other reason is that Andrew Garfield was 29 years old when they made this movie. 29 and still playing a high schooler. Even so, Andrew Garfield is great as Peter Parker with his naturally awkward, geeky energy and as Spider-Man, delivering some really good quips and one-liners. You have some great side characters too, like Gwen Stacy, Aunt May, and Uncle Ben, Flash Thompson, and George Stacy, all of whom are portrayed very well. The Stan Lee cameo is also just fantastic. I like the Lizard as a villain, I suppose. I mean, it looks pretty odd when he talks, but otherwise a solid character. It's not an amazing movie, but it's not bad either. Number 9, Spider-Man Far From Home. This film is really, really funny. Tom Holland is phenomenal once again. And a big standout from this one in particular is MJ, who is easily one of the best MCU love interests. Zendaya has great chemistry with Tom Holland, and he's just really funny on her own. The action in the film is fantastic, and there's so much variety to each different sequences, like with the elemental stuff, the Mysterio illusions. And speaking of Mysterio, I enjoy Jake Gyllenhaal in the role. That said, the movie is very flawed. It doesn't make a ton of sense why Tony Stark would give these highly weaponized talking glasses to Peter, because, he's young and he almost kills his classmates within one day of getting him. And I don't like Mysterio that much as a villain. I mean, yeah, Jake Gyllenhaal's performance is great, his design is really, really good, and I like him in the beginning before he's revealed to be the villain. But he's just so obnoxiously petty that it's really hard to take him seriously. Not to mention, I don't get why they treated the reveal that he was a villain like a big surprise. Anyone who knows anything about Spider-Man probably knows that Mysterio is a villain. So why is it treated like a big twist? Plus, the way he delivers his plan is ridiculously lame. He gives a speech and toasts Ralphie Parker. How menacing. Oh, what's that? The villain of the last movie threatened Peter in a car while holding a gun after having just discovered that he was the foil in his operation? Nah, let's have this guy give a speech about how he's mad at Tony Stark after he's already dead because he gave his creation a goofy acronym. BARF. Ooh. I like this movie, but there are still some pretty big problems. Number 8, Venom. Now, this movie is certainly very flawed. I mean, the script is not really that great. The side characters are all pretty boring, and there's plenty of logical gaps that I could nitpick all day long. But I'm not going to do that. You know why? Because I freaking love this movie. I mean, I can acknowledge the flaws, but I still love it. It's an absolute blast. You got Tom Hardy as Eddie Brock, and he's clearly having a ton of fun with his performance. The exchanges between Eddie and Venom are easily the best part of the movie. They're just great together. They have phenomenal chemistry. I think Carlton Drake is a solid villain, and Riot is not, really, but at least he looks pretty cool. The movie has great action and incredible comedy, especially when Eddie goes insane and sits in a lobster tank and eats lobsters. The whole movie is hilarious. It's such a fun and enjoyable film. Number 7, Venom Let There Be Carnage, the sequel. This film wisely focuses much more on the relationship between Eddie and Venom, and it treats it kind of like a romantic relationship at points. The two have amazing chemistry and a hilarious back and forth with each other. And unlike the first film, this one has a really, really good villain in Cletus Cassidy, played to absolute perfection by Woody Harrelson, who's clearly having loads of fun with this over-the-top, psychotic character. He's also complemented very nicely by Carnage, who is much cooler than I assumed he would be. The action is even more gruesome than that of the first movie, and it is awesome to behold. Now, the movie isn't perfect. The side characters, specifically Anne and Dan, are still very, very boring. They try to make them funnier, and I don't think it really works that well. The movie's also way too short. It always feels like it's going too fast, like they wanted to get to the mid-credit scene as fast as possible. That said, it's still a really fun, enjoyable movie. Number 6, Spider-Man 3. Yeah, it has its flaws, but I don't care. I really like the focus on Peter as a very flawed individual and how it deals with his egotism. Not to mention, the relationship between Peter and MJ is still really, really good. The villains are also solid, for the most part. When Harry gets to be a villain, he is great, and I love that he gets his redemption in the end, coming back to help Peter and sacrificing himself in the process. Not to mention, this is the best that Harry and Peter have ever been in this trilogy. I don't know why this is, but they just have such good chemistry here and play off of each other really well. Sandman is a decent character with a solid performance from Thomas Hayden Church and a great backstory. I feel like he could have been better, because he's not as quotable or memorable as Green Goblin or Dr. Octopus, but he's good overall. And of course you have the remarkable J. Jonah Jameson, as well as the best Bruce Campbell cameo of the trilogy. The real standout, however, is Bad Peter. That Bad Peter is what they call him in the DVD box. I still have the DVDs of this movie. That's how I watched it. It's awesome. My word, Bad Peter is legendary. The dancing, the strut, the fact that he actually says the words, "Now dig on this," it's all hysterical. That said, the movie does kind of struggle to find out who its main villain is. I mean, technically the real villain is the symbiote. Think about it. It's the one that causes Peter to become Bad Peter, and it takes over Eddie and turns him into Venom. The problem is the symbiote has no characterization whatsoever. Instead, we get like 3 sub-villains. Harry and Sandman are good, but then there's Venom. Now, I think Topher Grace is really good as Eddie Brock, but he is really bad at playing Venom. He's so corny and stupid, and not in an awesome way like Willem Dafoe. He's not menacing because he's clearly trying so hard to be menacing and failing miserably. He's also really, really whiny and kind of pathetic at points. When he was saying that Peter was humiliated him and saying stuff like, "I'm gonna humiliate you, just like you humiliated me," I actually yelled at the screen, "What's wrong, Eddie? Gonna cry?" There's also the fact that the stupid butler knew that Norman was responsible for his own death and never told Harry, even when Harry was going insane trying to track down Spider-Man. You know what? Screw the Simio. This stupid butler is the real villain. Yeah. Number 5, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Now, when this movie first came out, I thought it was good, but not great. Boy, was I wrong. This movie is excellent. I feel like Spider-Ham and Penny Parker could have been much better, and I think some of the modern hip-hop music is a bit out of place and almost took me out of the emotional beats during which they were played. But other than that, it's a great Spider-Man movie. Miles Morales is such a likable lead character who you can really empathize with, especially when he's at his lowest points. You also have some new versions of Spider-Man, like Peter B. Parker, who is not only very funny, he's also a great mentor to Miles. There's also Spider-Gwen, a pretty cool new take on Gwen Stacy, and the standout of the weirder ones, easily the best of the bunch, Spider-Man Noir, voiced by Nicolas freaking Cage. The villains are pretty great. Not only are there some really cool henchmen in, like, Tombstone, Olivia Octavius, even Goblin and Scorpion, they were pretty cool, but Kingpin, man, he is a great villain. I mean, sure, his design is, like, physically impossible, but he's a really compelling villain. However, I think that the Prowler is even better. The twist that he's Miles' uncle is so well done and emotionally staggering, as is his death. Oh man, it's so well done in this movie. The animation of this film is absolutely remarkable. It looks so cool. And the way they have it play out like a comic book movie at various points makes it even better. The movie is also really funny, which I did remember. I laughed quite a bit. Overall, it's a very compelling movie that I really, really enjoy. Number 4, Spider-Man Homecoming. Just a really fun, refreshing film. Tom Holland is amazing as this younger, more naive Spider-Man and Peter Parker. I also love some of the new interpretations of classic side characters. I mean, you have Marissa Tomei as Aunt May, and she's much different from the other versions, and she's great. You also have Ned Leeds, who is so much fun and has great chemistry with Tom Holland. The updated Flash Thompson was really funny. The movie also does a great job of capturing high school and all the awkwardness that comes with it. And then there's the villain. Oh man, the villain. Michael Keaton's Vulture is absolutely spectacular. For one, Keaton gives a phenomenal performance in the role, and for two, he's just such a compelling villain. He's this very grounded guy who's just trying to look out for his family, and that's a great motivation for a character like this. Now, if the whole twist thing hadn't happened, it would not be as good, but the twist makes everything fit together so naturally. I mean, that scene when Peter opens the door and Vulture's just standing there was a huge shock in the movie theater and just so cool. And it's shocking today, even. And then you have the scene in the car where Vulture's figuring out, he's like, this guy's Spider-Man. It's just terrifying and awesome. And then the building up to this confrontation where he threatens Peter, and it's just so compelling and great. And of course, Michael Keaton delivers this classic line that I'm surprised hasn't become iconic yet. Good old Spider-Man. In classic Keaton fashion, of course. Man, I love this movie. It's just so much fun. Number 3, Spider-Man, the original one from 2002. I love this movie. It's corny and goofy for sure, but I absolutely adore it. The story is perfectly put together, and the pacing is just brilliant. Of course, there's Peter Parker, who's a very well-developed lead character with so many little quirks that make him really stand out. He's also a very human character with very human flaws, and the movie does a great job of exploring these flaws in a natural way. Tobey Maguire is, of course, phenomenal in the role, and he delivers everything so unbelievably well. He feels so sincere and connected to this character that, in my opinion, he was born to play. The side characters here are just perfectly done. We have Mary Jane Watson, Harry Osborn, Aunt May, Uncle Ben, Flash Thompson, Robbie Robertson, Bruce Campbell, and more that are all excellent. However, they are not as excellent as J. Jonah Jameson. J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson is literally perfect. There is no one, not a single person, that can possibly compare to the legendary status of this performance that is, in my opinion, one of, if not the best portrayal of any comic book character in a film ever. The movie also has a fantastic and wildly entertaining villain in the Green Goblin, played to absolute perfection by Willem Dafoe, who kills every aspect of this performance. He's got the movements, the facial expressions, and the voice down perfectly. He's able to switch so easily from Norman Osborn to this bizarre Green Goblin, and it's so funny. I love the connection between Peter and Norman. The movie's also hilarious. There are some great lines that I just crack up at every time. The only critique that I have is that the CGI is kind of terrible. I mean, some of the effects have not aged well at all. Other than that, it's a near-perfect movie, the best Thanksgiving film of all time, and a fantastic origin story for this amazing character. Number 2, Spider-Man 2. This movie is a perfect continuation of the first film, building upon what made that one great and making something even better out of it. The story and character dynamics are just so compelling and interesting. The drama in this movie is some of the best I've seen in a comic book movie ever. Peter, for example, has this great arc about taking responsibility that somehow never seems like a repeat of his arc in the first movie. I love how the movie really digs in his psyche, fleshing him out and making him an even better main character than he was before. The movie actually spends time on his relationship with just about everyone, especially Mary Jane, who is given way more to do in this film. They feel like two real people who struggle with their true feelings for one another. You also have Harry, who has this great side plot that sets up his turn to villainy so well that, I don't know, maybe the third movie dropped the ball a little bit on that, but whatever. He's great in the third movie, and he's great in this one. Naturally, J. Jonah Jameson is fantastic, but you also get a better cameo from Bruce Campbell than in the first one, and the introduction of Mr. Ditkovich, the second funniest character in this trilogy, after J. Jonah, of course. You also have a phenomenal villain, Dr. Octopus, who, in my opinion, is a more compelling villain than Green Goblin. Maybe not more entertaining, but I think more compelling. He's played so unbelievably well by Alfred Molina, who suits every aspect of this character so perfectly. It is the best action of any Spider-Man film, and I will stand by that. Doc Ock's mechanical arms make for some awesome moments, like the train battle he has with Spider-Man being the big standout, but every action sequence, really. Overall, it's an excellent film, a great sequel that perfectly continues every single thing set up by the first movie, and it meaningfully explores what it truly means to be Spider-Man. But you know what movie does all the great stuff that those last 3 or 4 movies does, but it does it better? You know what movie has the best fan service I've ever seen in any film that's ever been made? You know what movie has topped every previous Spider-Man movie because it has a piece of every previous Spider-Man movie? It's Spider-Man No Way Home. Somehow, even though there is a lot of stuff in this film, it never once feels overcrowded. It finds time for everything it wants to do. Not to mention, it puts Peter through an emotional ringer. Without going into spoilers, I think this is the best and most tragic arc we've ever seen for Peter Parker in any Spider-Man movie. Tom Holland gives what is, in my opinion, easily his best performance yet. It's also one of the most epic, joy-inducing, jaw-dropping theater-going experiences I've ever had. Of course, you have the return of the classic villains, and they're all given just as much screen time as they need. Willem Dafoe and Alfred Molina are the two standouts, specifically Willem Dafoe. He is so great in this movie, and honestly, before this, I think Dr. Octopus was my favorite Spider-Man villain, but now that we have No Way Home, it's gotta be Green Goblin, and neither of them has missed one beat. They're just right back into these characters. Electro is much better than he was in Amazing Spider-Man 2. I mean, didn't really set the bar very high, but whatever. Jamie Foxx is really good in this role, and he actually does the villainous side really well. Lizard and Sandman are still solid and fun to watch. The movie doesn't do as much with them as they maybe could have, but I mean, they were out of the 5 that returned in the trailers, they were the 2 weakest, so whatever. Anyway, this movie has some of the biggest action spectacle in any Marvel movie. Heck, maybe any movie, but it actually has a great story to balance all that multiverse craziness out. And as epic and spectacular as this movie is, though, it never once takes the focus off of Peter. This is definitely his movie, no question. Also, spoilers in about 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Skip to the timestamp in the description if you want to avoid these spoilers. Also, watch the movie as soon as you possibly can because it's amazing. Here we go. Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's appearances were legendary. There is a tiny piece of me that was thinking that they might not be in the movie, but they were. And their entrance was the single coolest thing that I've seen in a movie in a really, really long time. The entire theater was going absolutely insane, to the point where I couldn't hear some of the stuff that they were saying. Everything this movie did with them was perfect. Whether it was like the banter between all three Spider-Men, I would watch like an entire 5-hour movie just of that. And even beyond those two, they went above and beyond with what they put in this movie. Like, they could have had just one scene with those three, but they get time. They're at Easter eggs, and it's so good. Oh my god, I love this movie. So, I was a little bit nervous that the movie might not deliver on everything it promised, because it promised quite a bit. But it absolutely did. No question. Not only that, it managed to surpass my expectations, which I did not expect at all, because my expectations for this movie were really, really high. It is everything I wanted it to be, and even more, and I could not love it any possibly more than I do right now. All I want is to watch this movie again. I've seen it one time. I plan on seeing it more. And that is it. Thank you so much for watching. Leave your own ranking below in the comments. I always like seeing your guys' rankings. Remember to like and subscribe. And as always, keep calm and watch No Way Home.